Welcome back. Great to have you with us on Primetime Business News. Now, steel manufacturer Arcelor Mittal South Africa has reported a loss, but it's significantly lower than previous losses. The headline loss for last year coming in at just over 1 billion rand. The year before, however, Arcelor reported a loss closer to 5 billion. Well, the company has bemoaned the impact of cheaper imports of steel products from China for years, but it says its fortunes have improved due to better steel prices and lower costs. Our reporter Nompu Siziba caught up with Arcelor's CEO de Klerk and asked how they narrowed those losses.
I think it's a combination of various factors. Firstly, we had good volumes. And as you know, this is a business that's all about volumes. So it's important to keep the mill rolling and produce the tons. Then we were very fortunate to receive better steel prices. I think, it's always difficult to say when a cycle change and turns up. And I have a feeling that we have seen that bottom last year. So we've seen some significant increases of prices, double-digit figures, and that assisted us to make a bit more than we did in the previous year, or to lose a bit more than we did in the previous year.
One of the things that you mentioned in your report is that you managed to bring down your headline losses quite substantially by managing your costs better. How did you manage that?
When you face the severity of a down cycle as we did in the previous few years, all of a sudden you realize that you can only control those elements that's in your control. You cannot influence the rand, you cannot influence prices. So for the last 2 years, the team were building up to make sure that we have cost savings on every front, whether it's throughput, whether it's talking to some of our main suppliers to pay them less, to be more effective. We've downstreamed some of our own spend, and we've taken out hundreds of millions of rand through the cost focus and a throughput focus.
We know that you appealed to government some years ago to ensure that you got the 10% import tariff, to penalize people importing material coming into here. And you managed to succeed with that. To what extent did that actually assist you in terms of your performance? And what about the other more punitive tariffs that you're seeking to get?
Yeah, there are two elements to this, actually 3 elements. Let me talk to the first one, the so-called bound rate, that we receive 10% support from government. So that means if people import steel, they now have to pay a 10% penalty when they import that. It did assist, but we only gained about net 100,000 tons out of that. So steel imports are still at the level of 1.2 million tons, which means 25% of the steel that we use in this country is still imported. And it's very important. If you look at what the rest of the world did, they just said we cannot allow China and other countries to dump cheap material into our country. So they've penalized any cheap imports heavily by hundreds of percent. 200% in the US is the latest number. And therefore we are appealing to government that this one element did assist. The second element helped, and that is the so-called designation. What that in effect means is it means that if you build a state-owned project in South Africa with state-owned money, state-owned enterprise, with the taxpayers' money, you have to use steel of South Africa. So that was a positive for us, but it only came through in December, and we haven't had any advantage of that yet. The big one, therefore, to your question, which is very relevant, talks to the so-called what we call safeguards. Some of the international countries call it anti-dumping. We haven't received that. And I'm speaking now to all the groups that we deal business with, all our customers, so that we have a joint force to go to government and try and explain to them that it is critical for us as an industry to get it. Because every 1.2 million tons of imports, as it is currently, talks to us not creating jobs for our own people. And you and I know, the President spoke about it last night very passionately. It's the one thing that we need. We need to create jobs for our people. We need to get people off the street and give them work. And this is such an easy way of ensuring that you get jobs back into South Africa, because we need that steel. We simply just shouldn't import it. We should make it ourselves. And this is the next big one that we are all fighting very hard for.
Now, Vim, you issued a statement a few days ago that you've now purchased Tabazimbi mine from Kumba Iron Ore. Just tell us what value that particular mine is going to be giving you, and you know what the prognosis is for it in terms of the performance of your business.
So we are busy with due diligence to determine what can we do with the mine. We have an environmental liability to the value of 1.1 billion rand that we need to rehab that over the next 15 to 20 years. Kumba is doing it on our behalf because they had the mining license. We are simply saying that maybe it's better for us to concentrate on that rehab ourselves, and therefore we want to bring the mine back into our folder in order to manage that 1.1 liability. On top of that, because we know the iron ore that comes from that, on top of that we believe that maybe we can open up a mine again. We don't know yet. We don't know to what extent, we don't know the capital, we don't know the timeline, but we know, again, to what the President spoke about, we need to get jobs. And if we can get that area back with jobs, we can find a product that is good for us. That will be the second focus. But unfortunately, I will only have that answer somewhere in April, May this year, after the due diligence has been done.
Now, we know that the steel industry is still rather sensitive. Yes, we've seen that there have been some price increases along with commodities in general, but we know that there's still a steel glut. And on top of that, you have mentioned that global and international demand has not been that great. So what's your forecast for this year? And are you hopeful that you're going to get back into profit and maybe give shareholders some dividends?
I would love to be in that position. Maybe we are. There are 2 or 3 important items that we need to go in our favor in order to get to that point. Firstly, again to what the President said last night, it's critical for us as South Africans to kickstart the economy and get GDP growth. We haven't seen that. In our steel industry, we were 4% negative last year on the growth of steel. So we have lost 4% of the previous year's steel as a result of the economy. We feed the main industry. We feed the spend that needs to take place in infrastructure development. It didn't take place last year to the extent that we hope for. So if government can get their act together to spend the money on all these big infrastructure projects, I see that Arcelor Mittal, as well as all the downstream steel producers, will benefit. I see jobs being brought back into this country. I see the GDP growth taking place. I see us as a nation having to fight together another downgrade in June that will be much easier because we will see this GDP growth taking place. And that's my hope. On top of that, the rand will play a significant role, the level of the rand. At 13.50 currently, the rand is, in our terminology, strong. It's good for the rest of South Africa, but it's not as good for us on a day-to-day basis. But we are focusing to say we can't determine where the rand needs to be. We need to get volume out into the market, we need to contain our cost, and we need to produce steel in order to kickstart jobs again.
As the CEO of Arcelor Mittal, Vim de Klerk, thank you for joining us on SABC News.